Hey, what's up, guys? It's David from quizhacker.net. Today we are looking at question 4 of the reading section of practice test 1 in the ACT Red Book. Today's question is pretty straightforward, pretty easy to answer because the information we need to answer this question we covered in question 1. If you missed that video, go back and watch it before doing this one. So the question reads, the main point of the first paragraph is that. Hey, for once, we've got a very straightforward question. No tricks there. So let's look at the first paragraph and find out what the main point is. How do we find a main point, by the way? Well, a couple of things. First, it's always good to look at the first sentence of a paragraph. That's often the topic sentence, and it will tell us straight up what the main point is. This isn't always true, but it often is. So you want to look there. Also, the last sentence of a paragraph will sometimes help you. Those sentences can sometimes be concluding sentences that wrap up a paragraph by telling us or reiterating the main point. Sometimes they're transitions, however, and they may not help us in that regard. So another thing you want to pay attention to in finding the main point of a paragraph is simply an idea that is repeated. And so this particular paragraph has a topic sentence that helps us and a repeating idea. Let's look at the first sentence. Mother, who wanted to keep her, always thought of her as some wild little bird, but I knew she was a homing pigeon. As I discussed in the answer to question 1, a homing pigeon is simply a pigeon that you release and it comes back home of its own accord. Okay, so Fran knew that she was a homing pigeon, it says in the first sentence of the paragraph. Then it goes on to say that Fran knew that Linda Rose would make a U-turn at some point. It goes on to say that Fran thought of Linda Rose as a human boomerang. So we've got the same idea repeated 3 times in the span of the first 5 lines. On line 6, Fran says, I was not surprised when I walked down the road and basically found the letter from Linda Rose. In other words, I wasn't surprised when I heard from her because, after all, I knew she was a human boomerang, a homing pigeon. I knew she would make a U-turn. I knew I would hear from her at some point. Okay, I think it's pretty obvious that is our main point. And so let's start looking at the answer choices. Remember, it's always a good idea to try to answer the question yourself before looking at the answer choices. Why is that? Because the incorrect answers are actually called, in the test writing industry, they're called distractors because they are specifically engineered to distract you. They aren't just sort of randomly thrown together wrong answers, right? They're engineered for a purpose, and that is to throw you off. So we want to minimize the influence they can have on us. And one way to do that is simply to get our own idea about what the correct answer is going to be before we start subjecting ourselves to the distracting incorrect answers. So let's look at the answer choices now that we have an idea what we're looking for. F. Fran believed Linda Rose would someday try to contact her. Yeah, so obviously that's the main point, right? Everything we talked about supports that. So, we feel very strongly about, about this. We're going to indicate with a star or an arrow that we really like this one, but we're also going to check the other answers to make sure. So G, Linda Rose acted like a wild bird when she was young. No, this does restate part of the passage, right? Part of the relevant part of the passage. The very first sentence of the paragraph says that Mother always thought of Linda Rose as a wild little bird. But then it goes on to say, Fran disagreed with that. And the whole rest of the paragraph is actually how that was wrong, right? So, no, that's certainly not the main point, right? Fran says, Mom always thought of her as some wild little bird, but I knew she, meaning Linda Rose, was a homing pigeon. So, nope, what Mother said was about Linda Rose was actually incorrect. On the other hand, she was a homing pigeon, etc., etc. So although G does repeat some language from the first paragraph, it's certainly not the main point. In fact, it's the opposite of a point that the paragraph makes. H, Fran finds the arrival of a letter from Linda Rose surprising. Yeah, so no. We said that in line 6, it says actually the opposite. So answer choice H is actually contradicted by the passage. Fran says, specifically in line 6, I was not surprised when I walked down the gravel road to the mailbox, blah, 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 and found the envelope with the Dallas postmark. That is the letter from Linda Rose. Okay, so H is contradicted. By the way, G, if we're going to classify that, it restates the wrong part of the passage, right? That is, although it's generally in the vicinity we're looking, it's not the person's opinion that we're looking for. J, Linda Rose's handwriting reminds Fran of her own handwriting. Okay, so Fran does say this. In fact, she says it at the very end of the paragraph. As I said, that's one of the places we want to look when we're trying to figure out what the main point of a paragraph could be. So looking at line 10, Fran is saying, starting at the very end of line 9, I didn't know a soul in Dallas, that's where the letter came from, or Texas for that matter, but the handwriting reminded me of someone's, my own. So hey, J absolutely restates that, right? But that is a detail in support of the main point of the paragraph. It is not itself the main point. How do we know that? Well, the way the paragraph starts and the idea that is repeated at least 3 times throughout the paragraph, which was, I knew this was going to happen. I knew I was going to hear from her. If you have questions, please put them in the comments below. I will answer them. I post new videos every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so be sure to subscribe. I'll see you next time.